Dr. Al, and I'm going to try and do this video relational and personal, even as I have the other videos, but perhaps on more so of a note this time because this topic of entropic reenactment hits real close to home, as I'll share in a few moments. But entropic reenactment is real important if you know someone or you yourself have been abused or neglected as a child, especially in the first 12 years of life, and you're trying to relate to a person who has been or help them as a counselor when they've been through something traumatic in childhood. You need to know about the concept of entropic reenactment. So let me glance at my notes here because there's a lot I want to cover, but again, try and do so in an informal and personal way. Entropic reenactment was evident in my life, as was contempt for self, both stemming from the abuse I had suffered. The human brains record the age of the abuse we suffer the first 12 years of life in such a way that we revisit the abuse on anniversary years of the abuse. P.G. Ney, in a 1998 article entitled Transgenerational Child Abuse in the Journal of Child Psychiatry and Human Development, dealt with the question, why do parents who were abused as children abuse their children? Especially since it was so painful for them, why do they pass on the pain, so to speak? Well, in the literature review from a developmental perspective, he concurred with Eleanor Ferjon, a developmental psychologist, who once stated, the events of childhood repeat themselves like seasons of the year. From their work, P.G. Ney and Eleanor Ferjon, I developed the concept of entropic reenactment, which is as follows. Being first abused as a child by many surgeries that I went through at age 2, though life-saving to me, were traumatic at age 2, especially the way they were done then in 1957. And for my whole life, every 2 years after the start of a relationship, a new job, or any kind of change, grad school, doctoral training, moving, whatever, every 2 years I tend to panic. The 2 years after the start of that change, I'd panic and go into entropy. And I found this over and over again in the lives of clients as well. Entropy is a term from physics that all matter decays. Working against relational entropy is a massive undertaking. So, again, in my life, age 2 was traumatic. Age 8 was traumatic. Other relatives abusing me sexually, physically, in other ways, emotionally. Neglect then followed, even from my parents and even from the way I acted in school and so forth. So ages 2 and 8 are entropic reenactment for me. So every 2 years after the start of a new event, every 8 years after the start of a new event, I go into this cycle of entropic reenactment. So what I share with clients, and I've been given permission to share one story of a delivery driver who was sent by his EAP, and he had been a stellar employee. Everything was great. And 8 years into his marriage, he started, and he got the job about the same time as getting married. So 8 years on the job, 8 years married. He started to self-destruct, come into work hungover, show up late, miss days of work, get his wife to call in sick for him, and he really wanted to divorce his wife, didn't like her anymore. They were having marital problems. And again, no indications of any difficulties prior to this time. So the first question I asked him is, did anything significant happen to you when you were 8 years old, third grade? And he thought about it. He couldn't recall anything. And then I asked him to go home and do some journaling and think about it, use the best ideas for journaling and so forth, and think about it. At which time he then called me up later that evening and he was sobbing, panicking, and he told me a tragic story of how his mother was murdered when he was 8 years old in the 3rd grade. A felon had escaped from prison and had murdered his mother, and he had blanked it out. The family didn't, the father and other children, his siblings, did not receive counseling at the time to help them work through the grief or anything. They just had to tough it out and, be stoic and try and get through it and all that. But he managed to completely block it out of his memory until probed, and then we explored that. So the sessions that followed with this gentleman were about resolving those issues, that unfinished business, as it's known as, from the grief and trauma that he had suffered at such an young age. Getting clean and sober then, after dealing with that issue, after working through the grief and processing the extreme rage and anger that he had stuffed, dealing with all that for all those years, after we processed that in a matter of a few sessions, really, we're not talking a long amount of time that the sessions occurred, but he was able to stay clean and sober, stay faithfully married and happily married, or get back to happily married, if you will, and he was able to be a good employee again and was promoted. A few years, he kept in touch with me. A few years after that, he had been promoted. So rather a success story in dealing with and overcoming this tremendous pull of entropic reenactment that our brains engage on, many times against our knowledge of it or will. We just kind of go into these repeated patterns of self-destruct that may be traumagenic in their nature. So this is something definitely to explore. Now, in working with children who've been abused, it's important to help them process the grief and abuse, the grief from the abuse, so that they don't get stuck in with entropic reenactment when they're adults or even in high school. So, for example, I've worked with high schoolers who are self-destruct like in their junior year. Well, I try and find out if something happened to them at age 3 years into high school. More than likely, if they graduate high school, make it through that and go to college, they'll self-destruct or go on entropic reenactment in their 3rd year of college or junior year of college. For me, of course, it was my sophomore year in high school, my sophomore year in college, my 2nd year in grad school, my 2nd year in doctoral training, my 2nd year on jobs, and on I could go. Please help people overcome entropic reenactment. This topic has not been researched much. I have not had the time or ability to research it as I would like to, but I would love to see this topic be researched more and for the word to get out there. Entropic reenactment will be discussed in some level in my next book, Addiction and Recovery, Best Ideas, Technique for Treatment or Journaling, which I plan to release on Kindle here in by mid 2017, if not sooner. But for now, I am sharing this video to those of you out there in the field working with kids who've been abused and neglected, or working with adolescents or adults who've been abused and neglected, and helping them overcome the negative patterns that result. So I've even made a chart so someone can chart their life. It's a scale that goes from neutral to +5 and from neutral to -5, and then conception, birth, age 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And I have the client subjectively chart out was this a really great year, +5, or a really negative year, -5? So my chart goes from +3 at conception, and that is, they tell the narrative. What have you been told about your conception from your parents? Were you wanted? Were you loved? Were you surprised? Were you surprised, baby? What's going on? So for me, conception was a +3, goes up to birth was a +5. My parents were real happy at my arrival, and doted over me, took care of me, and all that stuff. And then went from +5 at birth to a -5 at 2, up to a +2 at 5, 6, 7, kind of plateaued there at age 8, where other significant events occurred. Also in my life was a -5. And it is interesting that the gentleman that I helped, his huge -5 was 8 years old as well. So I could kind of relate and help him in that, not putting my stuff on him, but still relate and help him in that way. But then from -5 at 8 to +9, excuse me, a +2 at 9 years old, there we go. And then back to a -5 at age 10, and at 12 a -1. Middle school was not fun for me for any number of reasons that I won't go into here. But so these are my entropic reenactment stuck years: 2, 8, 10. That's where my -5s occurred in my first 12 years of life. 12 is important simply because that's generally the age of I'm blanking. Adolescence. When we become adolescents. So it's significant in that point. And obviously, I'm struggling here with my own stuff at the same time, trying to put into words the thoughts that I'm going through at this time. But puberty. There we go. Puberty. You just got to back up and take a few minutes, seconds, and puberty. 12 is generally the age of puberty, and at that point our brain changes tremendously from what it was the first 12 years of life, and significant events are locked in, if you will. Not like cement. We still can change even after age 12. It's just harder to do. So let's see where I'm at with time here. If I need to do a part 2 or what. So no, I'm doing okay with time, it looks like. So thank you for letting me share this with you. Email me if you need to, dralsarno@onthesamepage.net, if you have more questions, or if I could send you a PowerPoint on this whole topic, or the chart that's in the PowerPoint that I developed to help clients chart out their first 12 years in a rather subjective yet often accurate manner, when I've compared what they've said to court records or foster care records or social services or child protective services and those kind of things. So keep up the good work. Be encouraged, even though fighting entropic reenactment personally or with others, for others, is an immense battle. Keep up the good work. Or as we used to say in the 60s or 70s, whenever it was, keep the faith. All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.